Well, hello, everybody. This it for now, at least? Councilmember Willetts? Nope. Okay. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Corliss,
Here.
Halliburton,
Here.
Morales,
Here.
Nash,
Here.
Stead,
Here.
Willets, 4 present, 1 absent, 5 present, 1 absent, sorry.
Great, thank you. So we've got 3 items on the agenda. Welcome, ACHD. First off, it's good to see a couple of you here. We've got the impact fee update and capital improvement plan presentation. I've got Justin on here as presenting. Is that great? Come on up. We're just going to jump right in. And then are you Adam Schroeder? Schroeder? Great, you're next up. Nice to meet you and welcome. Hi there. I wasn't sure if it was you or somebody else, but good to see you. Wait, just a second. Oh, no. I don't know if you want to. Were you signaling to us? Yeah. Oh, you were just telling us to turn it on. Okay, great.
On top, green light, test. There we go.
All right, we can hear you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. For the record, my name is Justin Lucas. I'm here representing the Ada County Highway District, providing the council with an update on our impact fees and our capital improvements plan that we've been working on now for, oh my gosh, it feels like over a year and a half, almost 2 years that we've been working on this project, and wanted to bring forward kind of where we're at in the process, provide an update, answer any questions you may have. And then obviously encourage the council, if you so choose, to provide feedback to ACHD formally. So this update, we're calling it our 2025 update. ACHD in general updates the capital improvements plan on a 4-year cycle. This update was what we would consider a substantial update. We hired a consultant to essentially do a top to bottom review of our entire process. As part of that, we did a best practice and a peer review of other agencies, not only in Idaho, but across the West. Everything we do within our CIP and capital improvements plan and our impact fee program is governed by state law. There's a very specific set of state laws and policies that kind of dictate what we can and we can't do with impact fees. I know the city is familiar with that process also as you go through your impact fee programs. The deep dive really looked at a lot of different things, but there were 4 main topics that the commission asked us to look at. It was service areas and how we want to look at service areas within our county. The range of items or features that we would include within our CIP, what can be included, what can't be included. We also looked at the analysis time period, which is essentially the process we use to determine the need as we look forward using the transportation modeling. And then we looked at collectors, the collector network, and our ability to include or not include the collector network in our CIP. After that process, there was a deep dive. If you go on our website with the public outreach, there's hours and hours of conversations about this posted on the website. What we landed on was we felt like we were in a pretty good place, and that's what our consultant kind of provided to us. We also kind of decided that there was some area for kind of a deeper dive on, do we want to do something different? And that's what I wanted to focus on today, was the areas where we are kind of presenting changes based on all the things we've worked through. So with that, I'll jump right into the service area conversation. This was one of the areas, after looking at various different opportunities, the commission directed us to, in this draft, which is our public review draft, which is out right now, to present a 2 service area model for impact fee collection and our CIP. Service areas essentially define where the fees will be collected and where they will be spent. We looked at a lot of different options related to service areas. Multiple service areas, smaller service areas centered around each city. And what we found was that based on state code, the service areas have to be justifiable based on engineering and planning principles and the travel characteristics within those service areas. So you can't just draw the lines wherever you want. We actually, with our consultant, did a pretty deep analysis on travel characteristics in the county. And the two options essentially that were presented to the commission for moving forward, there was three of them actually. I'll talk to each of them. One was the 2 service area model, which is in front of you. The second one was leave it alone and do a single service area. Both of those we felt were justifiable based on the travel characteristics. The third was a single service area with an overlay zone, essentially over the downtown Boise area. After looking at all those options, the commission directed us for the draft that's in front of us today to go forward to the public and to our partners with a 2 service area model. So I'll pause there. I know service areas is oftentimes there's lots of questions about this. I'll see if there's any questions, and please feel free to interrupt me.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity to ask some questions on this. Quick question, on the blue line for Cole Road, would that line be part of west or east? That'd be part of east?
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Corliss, it actually, in the CIP, it describes projects that kind of touch the boundary. A portion of the impact fees collected from one side can support that project, and a portion from the other side can support that project. So it's not one or the other, it's actually kind of both. And that's how the projects that would be identified in that area would work.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, could you talk, Justin, about the kind of goals of 2 service areas and maybe what trade-offs are under consideration for 2 service areas?
Yeah, it's Madam Mayor, Councilman Nash, it's a really good question. And I think it's something that our commission has thought a lot about and, to be honest, hasn't made the final decision yet. This is the draft that is presented. Ultimately, when this goes forward to adoption, the commission will continue to deliberate on this issue. I would say I'll talk from a technical perspective, and then there's the kind of policy and perception perspective where I have to be careful. I got to be careful with the policy side. I can be pretty open on the technical side. Technically, the service areas have to show a travel shed that essentially shows that, hey, the trips within this area are generally bound within this area. Interestingly enough, these 2 service areas, on the west side, I think the number was about 60-something% of the trips. About 67%, I think, was the number of trips that originate within the west service area, stay within the west service area. On the east side, the number was actually a little bit lower, I think in the 50s somewhere. Edison has this information coming out of his head there. You can just... Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I got myself twisted around. 74 on the west, 60 and change on the east. So the majority of trips. When we kind of played around with the different boundaries, what we found across most of the county was the smaller you got, it was really hard to get above that 50% threshold for trips staying within that service area. There's a lot of travel across our county. The average trip length essentially within the Ada County is right about that 8 miles. That's not perfect, but it's about 8 miles. It's a pretty substantial distance. So it's hard to create a service area that captures those trips. So that's kind of the technical side of how we got to the service area conversation. As I said, we feel at the staff level and our consultant that these 2 service areas are justifiable based on the statistics and the numbers we have. A single service area is also justifiable. Ada County is somewhat unique in a sense of the way the development pattern has worked. It's over 90% of trips that originate in Ada County stay in Ada County. Canyon County does not have that same characteristic. I think we can feel pretty confident about that. But most people that start a trip in Ada County finish that trip in Ada County. So that's kind of how we develop these. And from a technical perspective, that's kind of the idea behind it is you want to be charging an impact fee that's connected to the trip generation and the need generated by that growth, because that's what it's all about. We're charging impact fees to pay for future growth within the system. On the policy side and the kind of the way to look at it, and I'll be using some words that have been discussed through our commission and through kind of our public outreach. There is I think, a perception of fairness that plays basically into this, which is the reason you would want multiple service areas is to try and keep those fees as close to possible to projects that would benefit that service area. What happens, and I'll show you this on some of the maps we're going to look at, is when you do the split, there's a lot more projects in one service area than there are in the other service area. And because projects generate essentially the fee, it's just a math problem, the impact fee is less in the east than it is in the west. And I think from a policy perspective, that's interesting. I'm not going to go into too much, debate about the good or bad of that, but it's certainly one of the outcomes when you look at it from a service area perspective. Did that help answer your question?
Have there been any conversations with the commission about whether or not what opposition exists either within other cities or on the commission about having two service areas versus one?
Up to this point, I think most of the conversations have revolved around the technical analysis and the commissioners essentially representing their unique positions on this issue. We are coming out right now, we're closing out our public outreach process. As part of our update to the commission in November, we will be providing them with essentially feedback that we've received on this idea from each community, if they so choose to provide it, the development community, which we have received some feedback on this idea from the development community, and then the general public. On the general public side, it's a little bit harder to say what they want or believe because it's a nuanced conversation. And, we have a lot of customers, well over 500,000, and it's unlikely we would get more than a couple hundred that would weigh in on something like this through our public outreach process. So that data is, not statistically, it's statistically difficult to extrapolate very much from that. But the answer is yes, the commission will have a chance to review the feedback that we receive based on this issue. Okay. So using those two service areas, essentially what we do is we have a total amount of projects that are needed based on the transportation modeling that are generated in those two different service areas. When you get those projects laid out and you split them between the two areas, and I'll show you a map of how that works, this is essentially the resulting impact fees that ACHD is proposing for some different examples. There's a really long list of land use types that generate impact fees, and it's very specific to the business. But these three are some of our more common impact fees that we charge. You can see for a single family home in the west service area, it's approximately $8,900. In the east service area, it's approximately $5,300. For office and shopping center, I want to be really clear that there's not a flat rate for those. It's based on a per 1,000 square foot, and you can see how those numbers play out here. So these fees are a substantial increase from ACHD's current fee structure. I would say the primary driver behind that is that we haven't updated our cost estimates related to our impact fees for the projects since pre-COVID. And we have seen dramatic cost increases related to highway construction across Ada County, which is the main driver for the increase in the fees, is accounting for essentially inflation that's driven largely by the national economy. So map-wise, you can see how that split works out. The vast majority of roadway projects and intersection projects, and I'll show you that map, show up in the west service area, which accounts for the difference. There are also some very significant projects in the eastern service area. Some of those are new connections, including Lake Hazel, Technology Way around Micron, and some other very important and critical transportation projects in the South Boise and other parts of the city of Boise primarily. But you can see how this plays out. These are these roadway projects are essentially based on the modeling that is generated through Compass based on the growth projections that the city provides to us. ACHD does not do independent growth projections. We rely on the modeling from Compass, which is based on the comprehensive plans of each of the individual communities. We plug that into the model, it generates a travel demand, and then we take that travel demand to generate the project needs. Here's a list of the intersections. This is through the public outreach process, also something that we are refining. There's a lot of projects in this plan. I do anticipate as we work with the development community, as we get feedback, some of these projects, including as we get feedback from our partners, could be modified, they could come off. There's different ways to approach a project. You can put the full project in, which means design, right-of-way, and construction. You can put a partial of the project in, which would be maybe we're only going to preserve the right-of-way and not put in the construction cost. And those are some of the final edits that we'll be making as we move towards adoption. If we reduce project cost by taking a project out or reducing the scope of the project within the CIP, the impact fee comes down. That's essentially how it works. So I'll pause there before I jump into timeline and next steps, see if you have any further questions or comments.
Madam Mayor, thank you so much. Quick question. So if we were to add a project in one of the service areas, am I understanding correctly that service area's impact fee would go up? The other service areas would not? Is that?
Madam Mayor, Councilman, yes, by adding a project, the impact fee would go up because it increases the overall total. The thing is, the projects have to be justifiable through the travel demand model. We can't just list any project we want. There has to be a justification for including the project. And so those are the projects that we've brought forward today.
Madam Mayor, really quick, Justin, can you explain a little bit as if we're looking at those ACHDs, looking at those projects and maybe looking to change that scope, maybe from the design right away and construction to just right away. How do you go about doing that?
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman, it's a great question. So through the travel demand modeling, we actually can get a feel for when the project will be needed. So those projects that trigger, let's say, within the first 5 or 10 years of the CIP, which is a 20-year plan, staff typically would recommend that we put the full project in. But let's say there's a project that's being triggered in the last 5 years of the plan, which would be essentially 15 or 20 years from now. And we've already done some of this refinement. Staff in that situation, working with our consultant, feels a lot more comfortable saying, maybe we're just going to include the right-of-way for that project or some preservation of right-of-way, knowing that we will have an opportunity to update this plan multiple times before we get there. So there's kind of a balance that we try to strike when it comes to what portion of the project goes in, and our modeling helps us kind of recognize when those projects will be needed. Now, it's not always perfect. And we rely on the Compass model and the city's comprehensive plans. But sometimes unexpected things happen that have a pretty substantial impact on the demand. For example, Highway 16 is going to have a significant impact on travel characteristics in western part of our county. There's going to be essentially new freeway interchanges at Ustick and Franklin. And that has over the past 5 years, as we've wrestled with how to handle that has, increased our focus in an area like that. Sometimes you can have something like a high school that's approved unexpectedly, that's not quite captured in the long-range plan. And some of those land uses have a significant impact on travel patterns that aren't always captured. And so we have to be able to respond to those.
Madam Mayor, Justin, are you going to get into the specifics on the actual impact fee and how those are going to change between districts or if a single district is kept?
So I can answer some of those questions today. What this shows would be the projected impact fee based on what I'm showing you in this service area model going forward for ACHD. So how that relates to the current impact fees, let me provide that. Right now, we have a single service area, so the two service area model would be a change. Right now, it's essentially about $3,900 for a single family home when it comes to an impact fee in Ada County. Doesn't matter where you build it. In the future, what you can see is if you're building a single family home in the west service area, it would be as projected here around 8,900, or in the east service area, a little over 5,000. Both are an increase from where we are today. If you were to go forward using essentially these same numbers for a single service area, projecting that forward based on the calculations, the impact fee would be a little over $7,000 for a single service area going forward. So in any scenario, the impact fee is projected to go up. It's just a matter of how much based on single service area or multiple service areas and how those projects play out.
So I've got a question if I could on this. So I mean, I appreciate that you all have worked hard to make sure that money generated in each municipality is spent in that municipality. In a situation where there's just one service area, do those impact fees that are collected in the municipality stay for the projects that are in that municipality?
So, Madam Mayor, in a single service area model, there's no restriction on the collection of those fees that they're spent within by a municipal boundary. So the ACHD Commission has an impact fee program. If it's a single service area, those fees are collected. That being said, we do have kind of geographic equity metrics that we look at when we're doing projects to see how we're doing. And so the commission has resources available to them to determine if we're out of whack from an expenditure versus collection perspective. But once again, those would just be resources they can reference. There's nothing that is essentially handcuffing them to make a decision one way or the other about those projects. With a two service area model, the impact fees collected in that service area should stay in that service area, and vice versa with the other service area. So there's a little bit more kind of restriction built into the system when you do a service area model like
Yeah,
that.
it seems there's more transparency too. I mean, that's how we do parks. We have service areas and we spend them where we collect them. Could you go back to that? So if the commission were to keep one service area rather than two, and they're checking themselves to see from an equity perspective, if they're keeping the funds where they're being collected or if they're diverting them, how could you go to that other map?
Let's see which, with the projects. There we go.
How do all the things on the left get funded?
Madam, it's a good question. So looking at the projections related to growth, and this is based on the Compass model, there is a lot more growth projected in the west service area than there is in the east service area based on the comprehensive plans and the way Compass has allocated the growth. So from a funding perspective, the amount of impact fees we anticipate to collect is much higher in the western service area than the eastern service area. Under a single service area model, the amount of impact fees overall is about the same. It's just how they're allocated. And so I think that those projects, depending on how the commission works through it year by year, I think any project has a good chance of funding. Where the nuance is, I think, with service areas that's interesting. Let's say you have a really expensive project in one service area or another, and you have an impact fee, allocation every year. Let's just use $25 million, which represents essentially what we collect today. We have projects now that cost $25 million, which to me is shocking. I've been doing this a long time. We used to not spend that much money on projects, but that's the way it is. And so you could find yourself in a scenario in one service area or the other where you don't quite have enough money based on the impact fee collections to build the project you want to build. And there is options within state code to do like loans between the service areas, and there are tools available to make the project happen, but it becomes somewhat of an administrative challenge to track all that money when you're sharing it between service areas.
Thanks. Are there further questions?
Madam Mayor, Justin, I don't know how many more slides you have, so I don't want to, you're there.
I'm pretty much there. Glad to answer questions.
So I guess I'm gathering a couple different things. One, is that there's an increase needed for impact fees to make sure that the cost of development is actually paying for the infrastructure that's needed. So we're getting closer to growth, being able to pay for at least some of that growth by increasing the impact fees across the board. So that's one thing, right? And then the second thing is that we're looking at a new model here where we're trying to figure out a way to assess where does it cost more for construction, in one side of town where it's going to be wider streets, larger projects that we're seeing more on the west side versus the east side that's a little more constrained as far as how large those projects can be. So the actual cost of the projects on the west side are more than the east side. Am I understanding that correctly?
Madam Mayor, on your first point, yes. On the second point, from staff's perspective, I would say we don't really look at it from that way. The projects on either side are similar. They're all capacity expansion projects, would be additional travel lanes to accommodate more motor vehicles. That's uniform across the CIP, and that's essentially handcuffed by state code. So it's not necessarily that the projects on the east or the west are all that different. It's just the volume of projects that is the primary difference. And when it comes to some of those potential policy outcomes of having two service areas, there's lots of differences of opinion on that, whether it spurs growth, whether it doesn't spur growth. From an impact fee perspective, just based on state code and what staff can get into, we don't look at it that way. We don't look at impact fees as a way to encourage or discourage growth. We look at impact fees as a way to ensure that the development community is paying for growth that it is generating the need for.
Yeah, I'm just like in a case of like a potential example, I'm thinking even if it was a small developer on one side of the street versus another developer on the other side of the street, like trying to figure out, okay, well, how come, my development on this one side is costing $2,000 more than this one on the other side? So that's where I'm trying to understand like why is there a difference between the two?
And Madam Mayor, Councilman Halliburton, it's a great question. And we've had multiple service areas before. And that was one of the complaints from the development community in the past when we had multiple service areas pre-2012 was exactly what you're pointing out. It seemed arbitrary to them on how we created the service areas. Now, from a planning perspective, I can tell you that it's not arbitrary, but you have to create a line somewhere.
Mhm.
And there's going to be a time when you're on one side of the line or you're on the other side of the line. And that's just the reality of service areas, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5. There's going to be some of that occurs. And the justification from a technical perspective is that the travel characteristics on that side of the line and the projects on that side of the line generally say that you're going to maintain the trips on that side of the line. But if you live right on the line, it's hard in an individual situation to claim that person isn't going to go one way or the other. But remember, this is a 20-year plan based on countywide analysis. It's not an individual analysis. We do have tools within our impact fee program. It's called an individual assessment, where a developer has the opportunity to say, I disagree with the analysis you are providing in your plan and how you're categorizing me. And they can do an individual assessment to try and get relief. Typically, it's relief from a fee where they feel like it doesn't apply to them. And we do a handful of those every year.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. And then I think the third part, I think that Madam Mayor brought up is the idea of if there, are two different service areas, then the impact fees that are generated in one area, has a greater ability to stay in that area versus going somewhere else. So if there was, a downtown development, all the construction that's going on downtown, that those impact fees are directed, towards this side of town instead of, potentially a project that's, 10 miles away, further towards Meridian. So those are sort of the three different components. There needs to be an increase. There's a difference, on one side versus the other. And then this is keeping those impact fees in those same areas. Are those the three kind of main aspects that we're looking at here?
Yeah. Madam Mayor, Councilman Halliburton, based on the draft, that's, I think, a pretty good summary of where we're at today. There are, as you can imagine, a lot of other nuance and differences of opinion related to some of those topics, and that's what the purpose of the public outreach process is. And then the commission will ultimately have to decide how they want to move forward.
Yeah. And then, so I guess the challenge for you all then is when you're trying to figure out where this line is, because you're a countywide, highway department, you're trying to figure out where to go. Where in, another area of the country, it would be each city, if they had their own transportation department, figuring out what their impact fees would be. The impact fees would be staying within that area. And you're kind of more dividing it based off of not necessarily city, but where the trips generated and where they sort of staying.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilman Halbert, I think it's a great point. And ACHD as a single purpose government for Ada County, when we do this type of analysis, we do it under the mandate which we have, which is a single countywide highway district. And when we do the traffic analysis, we look at it based on the characteristics of the entire county, not just a single jurisdiction. I'm a city planner. From a regionalism perspective, that's interesting. And there may be pros and cons to that. One of the pros is it does capture the fact that not all trips within a city or any specific geographic area stay within that geographic area. And in our county, it's actually a lot of trips. The majority of trips in most jurisdictions do not stay within that jurisdiction. So there's the pro side of it.
Yep.
The con side of that, and I think it's a fair point, which is because we exist, that the citywide, the city-focused analysis isn't something that we're able to justify based on the travel characteristics. And there's pros and cons to that.
Great. So I guess just one final comment here. I appreciate you all doing this. I think this is a good idea. I think we're off to a good start here. With the way that our model works here in the county and with our cities. I would say that the one kind of question mark here, and I have no idea what the answer would be, is when we're looking at places that are on the west side of Cole, when we're looking to drive, smaller development, affordable housing, that maybe are designed to actually generate less trips, to begin with, by being on public transit corridors and a variety of things here. Just trying to make sure, weighing if there's a potential negative impact on trying to get some more smaller, affordable units, starter homes in areas, and if the impact fees being on one line or the other is going to impact that. I don't know what the answer to that question, but it might just be something to take into account when we're looking at driving affordability. Is there a mechanism or some sort of possibility of looking at the service system and adding towards our efforts of building more affordable, units in places where it makes sense?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Just one comment on this proposal. I don't have strong instincts for or against this particular proposal. I'm probably a little bit of an outlier in the data, and that I'm probably 90% of my trips cross Cole Road. But I would be deferential to where the other cities west of this line are. So I would be very eager to learn what their feedback is, and would hope that would have a lot of sway in where the commission just ultimately decides to go.
Madam Mayor.
All right. Yeah, we've got about a minute. We've
Great.
got a full agenda.
Quick question. Want to ask about large projects in one service area. So significant projects like Micron in the East Service area. Just want to clarify, would all of those impact fees stay in the East Service area, or are there areas for larger, more general projects?
Based on Madam Mayor, Councilman, based on the model before you, we don't trying to think of the right word. I'm going to use the word discriminate, but that's not what I mean. We don't discriminate essentially against a project based on what it is, or identify any specific development project as a regional project. There's no mechanism within state code to do that. If that project is in that service area, the impact fees stay in that service area.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll have Bree put some things together in a letter that I'll bring to leadership to review.
Yeah, and thank you, commissioners, for attending.
Yeah, good to see you all. All right. Councilmember Halliburton, would you like to kick this one off?
I did not expect to be kicking this off, but Adam, so glad to have you here. I don't know how many conversations I've had about rats in the last several months, and good to know that there's somebody working on a potential plan. And I'm excited to hear more about what that plan could be and how the city of Boise and our other cities and jurisdictions could be involved. I don't think anybody wants to live in a future where there's rats in neighborhoods. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Councilman Halliburton, Madam Mayor. I'm Adam Schroeder. I'm sorry.
Adam,
Am I right
first off,
here?
welcome. Sorry, I'm
Yes.
already interrupting you. Just bring a little closer.
Okay.
And it's great to have you here. A lot of folks are wondering what can be done and how we can help. So welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's a little better. My name is Adam Schroeder. I'm the director for Ada County Weed Pest Mosquito Abatement. So currently, I have 3 departments. Our pest abatement district is all the unincorporated areas of Ada County. Mosquito abatement district is the incorporated areas, and noxious weed control encompasses the entirety of Ada County. And I'm here on behalf of our shared constituency, as well as some of the other constituents of Ada County, to talk about rats, because we're getting a lot of calls, and I'm sure you are as well. Just a few ideas to talk about and to present to the council for your consideration. We're thinking about maybe some legislative efforts over the winter. So I would just like to talk about some things with you and share some ideas that I have, with the caveat that this is much like a PR tour. I haven't gained any permanent or lasting commitments from any of the stakeholders that I've engaged with. This is more like a discussion opening. So I'll just get right into it. We'll talk a little bit about biology, some need for further action and interventions, some stakeholders. We'll identify some stakeholders, some desired outcomes, and maybe a framework for what might transpire or what could transpire if we choose to do something about this issue. And then talk about communication and then what that looks like moving forward. So Norway rats, you might be familiar with, known as the brown rat. Short, thick tails. Of course, they're prolific breeders. Litter size, usually 6 to 12 pups. They can produce 5 to 7 litters per year. And they can, of course, reproduce quickly after giving birth. So prolific breeders, as we all know, and they live in areas where harborage could be. They eat trash, dog food, cat food, whatever's left around. They are typically brought in by shipping containers or immigration, and I think that is the case here. I apologize, Madam Mayor, for this lazy chart. It's AI generated. We don't have any physical or actual data to analyze when it comes to rat reproduction, but the point of the chart being is that rats that are not monitored or controlled in any regard can proliferate quickly and produce large populations. So we also have roof rats. We're getting reports of roof rats as well. They are slender and lighter than Norway rats. They have longer tails and scaly tails. They're usually black or brown, and they have a white underside. I'm seeing some of the reactions. So roof rats are kind of the scary one to me because they're very athletic and they're very smart. So they live in the roofs and on the eaves and in the gutters, and they have the ability to, they're very smart. So I've heard from some of your constituents that have called me about this issue, saying that, they avoid traps. They steal food right out of traps without triggering the traps. They're very, wily in that sense. And they're very hard to get to. So if we're talking about trapping roof rats, that's kind of a serious undertaking when you're in your house and you're trying to get in those travel corridors where they're moving. And I included the stock image. We don't have currently any images. You see that white underbelly. That's typical of a roof rat, and they can fall from very high heights and survive those falls. So kind of scary to me, those guys. Currently, as the control authority for gophers and rock chucks in the unincorporated areas, we're getting a lot of phone calls. We're getting 2 to 5 phone calls per week on rats. Unfortunately, I have to tell folks that, we're not allowed to work on them. Those species are not included in our abatement statutes. And so I've gained the authorization of our board to at least start talking about this issue with city councils and other concerned stakeholders. So right now there is rising public sentiment that we're having a lot of phone calls from these. Councilman Halliburton shared his concerns with me about some of his constituents talking about Norway rats on their properties. So both species have the ability and have the ability to harbor and spread diseases: leptospirosis, hantavirus, salmonellosis, plague, other nasty diseases that we don't certainly want being vectored in Ada County or the city of Boise. And our rat infestation populations were currently unknown. We just don't know how many there are. We don't know where they're spreading. We don't know where they're traveling to and from because nobody's monitoring that. It's unknown currently if utility agencies are monitoring or taking control actions. They probably, many of them hire pest control companies to do standard services. I have spoken to Idaho Pest Management Association. I've given this presentation to them as well, hoping to gain their support in some kind of effort that's as we move forward. So rats are not currently listed as an invasive species and have not been adopted as a control species in our abatement statutes or state statute or code.
Madam Mayor, when I was at the state legislature, I would carry the budgets. Basically, we would appropriate the money after the fact. It was for both weed abatement and pest abatement, and I was always in tires. Those were like the three categories. And basically it was to help locals on an as needed basis on particular species that weren't, like, I would say, permanent or kind of change cycle to cycle. And I was always very surprised about how specific the statutes got on the types of things that the legislature would reimburse locals for. It feels like there might be a gap in state law here as it relates to considering these types of things, and also that counties would be dealing with rat populations. That feels like a 1980s New York City issue, which I am concerned if we're distinguishing between normal rats or rats that practice ninjutsu. But we can talk about that later. So have you identified a gap in state code, and do you know if the Ada County Commissioners plan on taking any of these issues to the legislature this year?
Councilman Nash, Madam Mayor, that's the purpose of these conversations. Essentially, yes, do believe that there is a hole. So currently, animal code in state statute does not directly address rats. Neither does the abatement district statutes for Ada County or any of the other counties in Idaho. Rats are not mentioned within the state code or title. So there is an area where, and I have spoken to, of course, Department of Agriculture about this issue. They're more than happy, of course, to accept a petition to list rats as an invasive species. I'm not sure that has a whole lot of actionable authority if that happens. That doesn't really allocate any funding towards the control of rats. It just says thou shalt not have rats. So that is a good step, I think, but I don't think that it would address, I think, the larger concerns of your constituency as well as ours. And so I think it's going to be a number of different issues or a number of different stakeholders coming together to create something that would be novel, at least I think in the state of Idaho.
Madam Mayor, just one more question. You said you're getting 2 to 5 calls a week. I'm curious, how are those calls going? What kind of advice can you give people? And maybe that's coming up later in the presentation, but.
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Stead. So the conversations are hard, right? Folks are, they're upset. They don't know how to deal with this issue. Many of them can't afford expensive pest control services. Many of them are exasperated by, opening your barbecue grill and you see a rat. It's it's disturbing, certainly, and folks would like to see some action. That's kind of why I'm here. We're a small agency. You know, the pest abatement district is only $1.5 million, and so we can't really take this on by ourselves. Although I do believe that we're best positioned to do some kind of control action, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So.
Yeah, I'd suggest, given the time, we've got about 15
Yes,
minutes,
ma'am.
that we get to the action piece.
Yes, ma'am. So potential challenges is that we don't have legal authority. The fragmented efforts, you know, pest control operators, they only can respond to consumers who can pay for services. And then inconsistent communications or documentation methods. We have a lot of cultural risks here, as far as at least that urban infrastructure, the abundant food, and the weather. I think that creates some risks. Stakeholders are, of course, all the cities, the PCOs, the public, Department of Health and Welfare, I think should be involved, as well as the Department of Agriculture and city steward departments and districts. Desired outcomes, of course, we want to prevent disease outbreaks and loss of human life and, you know, prevent rat apocalypse. So I certainly don't want to, you know, be playing a flute in the middle of the streets trying to get the rats out of here. There are current program models that I've spoken to about creating GIS rat control or GIS-based rat control reporting. New York City is one of them, of course. Multnomah County has a rat control program that I think we could model somewhat effectively. I'm not sure about the efficacy of that program long term because rats, of course, are still proliferating in Multnomah County. As Ada County, we have the ability to declare an interim abatement district, and that could include the incorporated areas of Ada County and include that species for some type of control effort.
And how long does the interim basis last? And is the county considering this at this point? And how quickly, if and when done, can you then begin to take action?
Madam Mayor, so the interim abatement district declaration would only last for 2 years. And so 2 years, it would be a long time, I think, if we're talking about creating some kind of a program that would actually control rats. I'm not sure 2 years is going to be there.
Sure, but is that if you can do that immediately, is that something that is a bridge to then begin, given that it's 60 baby rats a year by rat, that's 2 years
Yes.
where
Yes,
you could begin to take on these rats while we're working on a longer term program?
oh, Madam Mayor, I apologize. I thought you meant that it was 2 years was a long time. No, yes, 2 years is a long time for rats to proliferate. Yes, I
Well,
agree.
and I meant it would be a long time for then you to continue working on longer term programs.
Yes, ma'am. And that's kind of the issue. I do believe that we can, our board would agree to something like that. I'm not exactly sure about the funding mechanisms if we're to absorb those costs of doing that. So we can also add the species to an existing district. Right now, I think our abatement district, the mosquito abatement district, is the incorporated areas, and rats are, of course, you know, urban pests. So it would have to be either in that district or the interim abatement
Madam Mayor,
district.
I think to clear this up, even if the emergency declaration is made, there's no new funding mechanism that's attached to that.
Except
Those
it looks
assessments and
like,
taxes are just legal authority to spend existing assessments and taxes
oh, you
on
can't
that.
add another assessment. The legislature has to say yes to another assessment.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Mayor. As far as my understanding goes, yes, they would have to do that, or the Board of County Commissioners would have to allocate funds for that and create a district that would go to the voters.
So they have legal authority to create a separate entity.
Much like the mosquito abatement district, the pest abatement district, we would have another rat control district.
Do we know what the threshold is on that? Is it 50%?
Yes, I believe so.
Do your other slides address what you would recommend, what you're working on in terms of next steps?
Yes. So what I think that we can do pretty quickly is employ a coordinator. So I think we have the tools, the GIS-based tools, to start taking reports for rats and start documenting those. And then creating that mobile app for folks, public pest control operators, to start tagging those locations where they're finding rats. I think that's a pretty easy ask, and it's a pretty easy lift for us to do. However, if we're going to talk about a comprehensive control strategy, that's something I think that's going to take a lot more than just what we can do as a small agency that we are. And then also, creating that and educational materials and distributing snap traps on a request. If we can find some grant funding or find some support from the cities to pool those resources and maybe start we could be the house for that, I would say. But to absorb those costs into what we do, I'm not sure we're able to do that effectively.
Madam Mayor,
I'm sorry.
how much is a snap trap? Like, what does that cost?
Wholesale,
Whatever
50
it costs
cents to
you,
$1.
how much is a snap trap?
50 cents to $1, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's $1 on the high side per trap. And then real quickly, how effective are those?
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Willits, efficacy really goes to if you're getting that trap to where the rats are, if you're hitting those travel corridors, and that's where the pest control operators, they're specialists in that and identifying those travel corridors and those burrowing locations. And so I can't really speak to the efficacy of a single trap in the hands of maybe a homeowner as opposed to a pest control expert.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, that's essentially what I'm looking at doing or trying to gain support for doing, and then talk about passing legislation to create eradication fund, either through health and welfare or ISDA, and then ask the cities to prohibit possession and harborage, or to create more structured codes around rat harborage and areas where rats proliferate. Creating eradication zones might be an option, or a statewide rapid response team. And we can actually employ those control specialists. But like I said, it's a matter of funding. These again are our stakeholders.
Could you go back to for the legislation, do you have a draft legislation that you can provide?
I'm working on 3 different versions. One draft legislation would be state control. They create the fund, they allocate the resources, and then either it's a mandated county control service or something therein. And then second would be that it would be a state PCO partnership, right? If that rat control fund was created, then perhaps we could, counties could contract with pest control operators to provide those services to control rats where they proliferate, and then hopefully gain some grant funding and help build up that fund and build up that structure. And then the third would just be, a mandated county program.
And with that mandated county program, you then have the ability to assess for it like you do for mosquitoes?
Madam Mayor, yes. I'm still trying to work this out as far as what that looks like on the state level, because I know that it's probably going to be a big ask to set aside funding for rats for this legislative session, considering the budgetary issues that the state has right now. But certainly it's something that I'm going to bring to legislators, and hopefully with your support and your legislative support as well, we can get some momentum behind creating something. And then, I'm not sure that this solution is going to rest with just me. I think it's going to take a lot of people and a lot of different stakeholders coming together.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think to be clear, there's potential funding, but it's also the authority. So those
Right,
are
the
like two
enabling
different
things.
things that you're looking for. So there is different state supports. One of it is actually to name rats as part of your authority to address. That's one thing. Another thing would be to make sure that there was funding available to address it. I'm understanding that correct?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilman Halliburton, that is correct, exactly. Mandated control, where does that funding come from? And who's actually providing the control efforts? Are those county folks that are doing that, or are those PCOs, pest control operators, that are doing that action? Or are we just distributing snap traps and educational materials?
Yep. Because at this point, it seems like you're authorized a very select amount of species to address gophers, mosquitoes, a few other things. And so that explicit authority hasn't necessarily been given to you. So it takes some state legislation changes to give you that authority. And then that would open up some resources there, but additional funding would be needed potentially from the state to address it as well.
Exactly, sir. Yes.
Yep.
Do you believe that if you were given the authority to address, that you could collect from a district, just like you do for mosquitoes? I mean, on my tax bill, I have a mosquito abatement district. So for each of us, if we had on our tax bill, like rat eradication district, which I think is what everybody wants, would that generate the funds needed for the pest district? This is a pest, to then have a comprehensive program to beat these creatures back.
Madam Mayor, I think that that's what would be the solution on the county level. Yes.
So then it would be, you need enabling legislation to allow you to take on rats, as well as permission from the legislature to assess for the cost of a countywide rat program.
Yes, and I believe that would also come from voters as well, to create
So
that
you'd have to
district.
take it to ballot next fall.
I would believe so. Yes, ma'am.
So I would be supportive, and I'd encourage you to press the legislature, and we can help. And I can't imagine that these other cities, especially where these rats have come from, that have so many more than we do right now, wouldn't be supportive as well, to ask the legislature to allow you to handle this, and then to put it in front of county voters to allow you to handle this. And then we can build the program that we need, that I would imagine is a lot more than just handing me a whole bunch of traps, right? Like if it's 60 a year per rat, like I can't handle that many traps. I don't know what I'm doing. You can. Very impressive. Very impressive. So you could go door to door with traps and show people how to do it. But I would encourage you and all of us to be supportive of your efforts to get the legislature to say yes to solving a problem.
Thank you, ma'am. And that's why I'm here, is to essentially raise the conversation, gain support, and build a coalition to try to get something done.
Madam Mayor, real quick. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad that the city has invited you. I wrote about this in my newsletter a couple of months ago, and people are frustrated. And I can tell you that people are tracking rats via Nextdoor. Like that is how people are figuring out where they are. I can tell you where they are in my neighborhood. And I agree. I think we have to do whatever we can to eradicate this now, while we still can. And people are rightfully upset. And I think if we do not act, we will regret the inaction. So let us know how we can help you, because we want to help you.
Madam Mayor.
Do you have additional slides still?
No, nothing of consequence. No. Yeah. So next steps, just, yeah.
Madam
Yes.
Mayor, just some feedback on what I'd like to see over the next year. I think advocating for enabling legislation so that the county could take action to create its own district. The county following up on that and creating its own district, I would be supportive. I think specific feedback on types of legislation that you could look at if you are looking for some type of fund. I would strongly recommend not advocating for something in Department of Health and Welfare. I think the general sentiment in the building is that it's big as it is. And I had a lot more success trying to do pest abatement through ISDA. And then I would also look at, even if you can't get revenue dedicated to this, creating enabling legislation that is unfunded keeps that in the memory of legislators who are looking at the code. And it's a reminder, hey, we have an unfunded mandating code. And then finally, I would also consider, it gets kind of in the weeds on budgeting, but deficiency warrants tied in code. If you can get a deficiency warrant there, it's something that reduces the overall like ongoing obligation to these agencies. But if one year there's $1 million in rat mitigation and the next year there's 50,000, it really helps control costs. So that'd be my specific feedback on what we'd be supportive of. And we would love to be partners in any way we can in the legislature and with the county on getting this done. I think once some of those systems are in place, I think it'll be a lot easier to build financial support from some of these jurisdictions. But I think we need to see a system in place before those conversations can get like real.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Mayor, in talking about the funding and we're looking at for potentially fall next year, Adam, what concerns do you see and no action happening within the next year?
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Corliss, well, like I said, I worry about the fact that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know how many rats are proliferating. We don't have any idea of what the scope of the problem is, other than the complaints we get and the next door posts. So we know there's rising public sentiment. There's obviously an issue. I would hate to ignore it. The longer we ignore it, the worse it gets, is what I would say. And then Councilman Halliburton talked about how those transmission corridors, that Boise River corridor, is certainly an area of concern, along with the irrigation canals and everything else. Those are areas of transmission, sewers, that sort of thing that we really need to get eyes on so that we can see where they're moving and what the size of the problem looks like. If we can't do that, then I'm not sure that that you're going to get less complaints.
Madam Mayor, quick follow-up. Adam, thank you so much for this too. And I'm wondering, what do you think? Could we look at going forward with a mobile app to start tracking the problem? Is that something you think the county would consider?
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Corliss, I believe so. I think that's a pretty easy lift. I've already spoken to our GIS department about creating that mobile app and then creating, of course, another map for our reporting purposes. That's pretty easy to do. I just have to have the authority, if the board can grant me the authority to do that. And I'm not sure what legally that means, as far as, not having those species in our abatement district statutes, if they can even grant that authority. So that's kind of where my hands are tied. I will certainly pursue it, though.
Yep. Madam Mayor. Adam, first, I just want to make sure that, because I think council members heard rats and everybody's excited to jump in. Is there anything else in the presentation that you're wanting to cover, or anything that you weren't able to discuss that you still have?
Thank you, Councilman Halliburton. Not necessarily, other than the fact that, yes, it's a city of Boise problem. Yes, it's an Ada County problem. It's a city of Meridian problem, but I don't think it stops there. I think if they're not in the Magic Valley right now, I'm sure they will be soon. I'm sure they're in North Idaho. I've heard reports to that end as well. So if it becomes a county or a city issue that we can try to solve here, but the state ignores it, I'm not sure that will work out either. So I think, legislatively speaking, to have that framework that Councilman Nash was talking about, and then start creating those funding mechanisms that will enable our local authorities and local jurisdictions to take action would I think be the best plan overall.
Great, thank you. And if I can just maybe sort of summarize some things from my lens, it still seems like there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know exactly what the next steps are, but we think that steps need to be taken. We think that the rats originated, from shipping containers in Eagle. They're probably traveling up our waterways. You're already working with our public works department to address, some monitoring of our side of this issue, as well as canals, the river, and we're now finding them in Boise. We're finding them in Garden City. Certainly we're finding them in Eagle and maybe some other areas as well. But there's not a real specific jurisdiction that's allowing anybody to address the issue. You're trying to be that jurisdiction that has the ability to address that issue, but you need some work from the state as far as state legislation to be able to do that, as well as support from all of the cities who are affected by this for some sort of coordinated approach, whatever that may look like when it comes. But it probably involves traps, it might involve, bird boxes, it might involve how we store our food, all sorts of different things. But those are the types of things that are in the works. And Ada County wants to be that coordinating effort if there's mechanisms that allow it to do it, and cities that are supporting you in that effort. Is that kind of?
Councilman Halliburton, Madam Mayor, yes, I'm not married to the idea of Ada County, my small department taking on rat control for the entirety of the county. I'm not sure that's a huge lift. But I think we're well positioned to do something. I want to do something for not only our constituents, but yours as well. And so gaining support from all the city councils and trying to get something legislatively done and creating a funding mechanism, and whether or not that lies with the county or it lies with an entirely new department at Department of Ag, that outcome I'm not married to, other than the sense that if we can get results for our constituents, that's what I'm after.
And then I guess just the final thing that I would say is it does seem like there is a sense of urgency here of if the problem can be addressed now, it may be something that we're able to tackle, but the longer that we wait in addressing it, the more challenging that becomes. And so whether it's enacting an emergency order through the county to be able to, do something for a couple of years, working with the state this session, there is some urgency in both, I think, cooperating municipalities, but also state level support in getting this done.
Yes, sir.
Great.
Exactly right.
Madam Mayor. Adam, if prior to like this infrastructure being in place to support long-term rat abatement, what would the county do with funding if it fell out of the sky immediately?
In terms of poor rat control.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. So first steps I think I would take was to create that, make sure I have the legal framework to work on it. But then, create that GIS database, create that reporting tool, get it out to stakeholders, get it out to those town hall meetings in all of our cities. Start trying to gather information on those populations and where they are, what the numbers look like. Start engaging our PCOs, see if they will report on the actions that they take in for rat control. So I think at that point, funding, is not an issue. We would just try to get our eyes on what the scope of the problem is, so we can create an effective strategy to handle that, logically and systematically.
Madam Mayor, Adam, have you identified costs, like hard costs associated with reporting tools and information gathering projects like that?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Nash, as far as the cost to create a GIS database and that reporting tool is very minimal. For if we were to do it in-house, I think it's pretty easy. And that cost is really negligible. It's just the authority to be able to, do that.
Madam Mayor, sorry, I just got to hold you on this one, Adam. Like when you say negligible, do you mean 5,000, 50,000, 200,000? What do you mean?
20,000.
Okay.
I really appreciate you looking at all this and bringing it to us. I think you can sense the urgency in many of us. We are hearing it from constituents, want to get this taken care of, and really do believe that a countywide or larger effort is the only way to do this, given the way they're traveling. And appreciate all the thought you're putting into it, and look forward to being helpful, especially as you get what you need from the legislature for us to be able to solve this problem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks. All right, we have our last item. Have a great night. Thanks so much for being here, Adam. And now Nicole and team from the Office of Police Accountability is here. No.
How about now? Is that working? Yes. Very good. Well, good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. It's really nice to be back with you again today. As you indicated, Mayor, I'm Nicole McKay. I'm the Director of the Office of Police Accountability, and it is a pleasure to be back here with you to present our semi-annual report. Our data analyst, Lexi Whitmore, and I will both be presenting today. Lexi will kick us off with a preview of our new OPA interactive data dashboard. And then I will follow up on some key areas, including contacts to OPA, critical incidents, recognition and recommendations, collaborations and training, and finally, our priorities and goals going forward. We are especially excited to share our new interactive data dashboard. And I want to take a moment to publicly recognize and thank Lexi for her outstanding work in developing them. This project was a major undertaking, and Lexi's expertise, persistence, and attention to detail were truly exceptional. Her work has created a powerful tool that will greatly enhance transparency and accessibility to Boise's policing data. Lexi?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. I am Lexi Whitmore, OPA's data analyst, and a little shorter than Nicole. I'm excited to present OPA's public-facing data dashboards, which are available on our website right now. They actually just went live yesterday, so we're very excited at OPA about that. I'm going to go ahead and move over to that site to give you a direct demo of the data and functionality. To access our data from the OPA homepage, you can click on the OPA data section right here. The dashboards share interactive data on force and officer demographics at the Boise Police Department from 2023 to 2024. And moving forward, the dashboards will be updated annually with new data. Our goal is to give the public a transparent look at Boise Police Department data. Currently, only 5% of police oversight agencies nationwide provide interactive data dashboards to the public, and among those agencies, only one provides use of force data, as OPA is now doing. We believe this project makes Boise a leader in police oversight transparency. I'm also greatly appreciative of the data access and support that OPA has received for these dashboards, and that really made the project possible. Now let's get into the data page itself. If you have questions or would like me to stop on any particular data point to highlight it while we go along, I'm happy to pause at any point, and I'll also stand for questions after showing all 4 data dashboards. To help acclimate users to the dashboard, the page starts with some quick instructions. One feature of the dashboards explained here is that users can filter by year, as well as show of force versus use of force. To define those terms up front, show of force means pointing a weapon at a subject, such as aiming a taser, while use of force means discharging a weapon or making physical contact with a subject, such as actually firing the taser. And on the dashboards, if you haven't filtered anything, you're seeing all the data available. In addition to these brief instructions, we've also provided a frequently asked questions section, and that can be seen easily by clicking right there. So let's take a look at the dashboards themselves. First, we have an overview of use of force, and we can look at that in full screen mode, which is a feature available to people anywhere. So accessing from your home computer, you can also see full screen if you want to see more detail. On the right here, you can see that 0.08% of Boise police calls for service in that 2023-2024 time period involved some kind of force. Specifically, force was used 356 times. This visual over here on the top left shows the percentage of specific call types that resulted in force. So we can see that most call types with a higher rate of force involved a violent crime or a weapon. The visuals on the bottom show the stated reason for an officer using force and the specific type of force that was used. There are also many ways to explore the data beyond what you see in this basic view. First, we have a few filters at the top. Can filter by year, like so. And now you're seeing all the 2024 data only. You can also go in and filter by show of force or use of force. So now we're seeing only show of force data. There are also more options for users within the visuals themselves. In the percent of call types visuals up here, there's a search bar to help users find specific call types they're interested in. So let's say I'd like to know more about traffic stops. Instead of scrolling through the many possible categories, I can go up to this search bar here and type in traffic stop. And now we filtered the data just to see that specific call type that we're interested in. We can also mouse over a particular call type to see more detailed information about it. So for traffic stops, we can see that there were over 50,000 calls for service total, and 18 of those calls involved some sort of force. We can also drill down even further by selecting a call type. So let's try armed subject. By selecting that call type, we've filtered the other visuals to just see data about armed subject calls. So now we can see that force was used in these calls 3 times because of the presence of a weapon and once because of active aggression on the part of the suspect. We can also see the specific types of force used. So 2 officers in these calls were aiming firearms, 1 aimed a taser, and 1 used a punch or kick. So you can really get a lot of details on the specific call type that you're interested in. Finally, the visualizations at the bottom can also filter each other. So for example, if a user is curious to learn more about why punches or kicks are being used, they can select that specific type of force and see the reasons come up over here. So in this case, we can see that a battered officer, active aggression, or physical resistance are the top reasons given for using that punch or kick force type. As you can see, there's a lot of depth to the data for those interested in exploring further. So that is our first dashboard. Moving down to the second dashboard, we have information on officer demographics and force rates. Here on the left, you can see data on officer gender, age, and race, as well as a total number of sworn officers at the Boise Police Department. This gives the community a window into who their officers are. The visuals on the left here show, the visuals on the right show data on how much force officers are actually using. For 2023 to 2024, we can see that 45% of officers used any force at all. Among officers who did, the average count of force was 3.2 uses of force. Finally, this visual on the bottom right shows a more full distribution of force usage. So we can see how many officers used force once, twice, or more times. For example, 70 officers used force 1 time. This chart allows users to see the full spectrum of force while still showing that the majority of officers use force once or twice. As in our other dashboards, you can see that we also have the year filters up here at the top and the show of force versus use of force filters. Users can also click on a demographic group to see their specific force rates. So let's try this out for officers in their 40s. Now you can see specifically how many officers are in that age group and their specific force rates. So that's another way to drill down in this dashboard. Next, we have a force map that shows users where force events occur in the Boise area. The shaded areas represent BPD patrol districts, while the numbers represent how many force events occurred in each district. Users can also hover over a specific district to see more detailed information. Oh, zooming in, sorry about that. Another interesting feature of this dashboard is that you can search for a specific address to find an area that you're interested in within those patrol districts. So we can try that out with City Council. There's City Hall's address here. And that zeroes in right on the location that you're interested in. Can also zoom in and out to whatever desired zoom. And we can see that the highest concentration of force tends to happen downtown in Boise. We also have filters for time period or use of force and show of force here. They're just located a little differently on the map. You can find them off to the side here in the drop downs. There's a lot of specificity you can get. Our last dashboard shows time-related force trends. On the upper left here, you can see a detailed breakdown of the weekdays and hours when force occurred. This allows users to spot trends in the timing of force. We can see that force most often occurs in the later evening hours or the early morning hours. One unexpected insight for us from this visual was that some weekdays, like Tuesdays and Wednesdays, actually saw more force than the weekends in this two-year time period. Moving down to our line charts at the bottom, users can see the number of times force occurred in each month for 2023 and 2024. You can also hover over a specific month to see the actual count there. For example, July of 2024 had 10 force events. At the moment, we only have 1 year of data for show of force specifically because BPD began tracking that in 2024, but we're looking forward to having more data next year as it becomes available. Finally, the chart on the right shows the average number of force events per month to highlight those broader seasonal trends. And we can see that force rates were highest in the summer and over the holidays. Once again, we have our year filters and our force group filters for show of force and use of force at the top. So many different ways to slice and dice the data here. That concludes our demonstration of OPA's new data page. We're really excited to have the data available for the public to explore. Before Director McKay continues our presentation, I'd be happy to take any additional questions.
Madam Mayor, I just want to thank you so much, Lexi. I know this was a huge lift. Even hitting that deadline was in question just a couple of weeks ago. So really appreciate all the effort here. I know that it took probably months and months of work getting that data in the right spot. And I'm so glad that we'll have that that model to lean on moving forward to continue to plug the data in, and appreciate the office's commitment to transparency. Thank you so much.
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem Stead, I really appreciate your thoughts and happy to present this to you today.
Madam Mayor, could you go back to that showed the use of force, number of uses of force by officer, the bottom right corner of this page? Yeah, have you found anything interesting in outliers here? I imagine higher uses of force applications might be associated with different beats. But I also wonder if there might be individual anomalies that stand out.
Definitely, we do look at that. We find there are certain areas of the city and certain shifts that see higher use of force. One challenge in potentially waiting for that is that we don't have historical data. So while I may be aware of where an officer works and when they work right now, I am not able to find that information for, say, January 2023. So we do, when we look at individual officer cases, we do keep that in the back of our minds, what may be influencing their decisions to use force aside from training, decision making. Location and time also do matter.
And is there any correlation between number of force applications and then escalation in force applications? So is someone who's maybe more prone to use force, maybe more prone to escalate force uses?
That's something that I would like to look into, do a more substantive analysis before answering. But sometimes I do think we can see the opposite, where you may have a higher count of force, but it's lower level force to avoid a higher level force. So instead of firing a firearm, for example, you may try to use a less lethal launcher, pepper ball, K9 first. So you may end up with a higher count, but potentially a better outcome.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think that would be important to me in like when council and other policymakers are looking at force applications. I had a conversation with Deputy Chief Brooks today about this, and we had talked with Nicole recently about a specific incident where maybe we're using less lethal options more frequently and having fewer number of lethal applications of force. And I think that might be a good problem to have. And I'm appreciative of the work that's going on here to inform some of those decisions, both of training and how our officers are responding to some of these incidents.
Madam Mayor, thank you for the work on this. I was playing around with this the other day, and then like 45 minutes passed and I was still playing around with it. There's a ton of information here. And like one of the things I was trying to figure out was why on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, maybe there was a um, higher show of force. And so I was trying to figure out, like, is it because of Mardi Gras? Is it because of, 4th of July? Like, did these happen on holidays? Like, what was going on here? I never could actually figure out like if there was a real reason, but it was actually really interesting to be able to mess around on here. I imagine a lot of students, a lot of journalists, and then just anyone in the community will be able to navigate this pretty well. And I also found it really interesting looking at the the different districts and areas, trying to geographically figure out, okay, well, what's going on in this particular area, and why might we see one more here or somewhere else? So all these things I think are really, really interesting. And I think it'll be interesting for us as council members to now hear from you in the future of, are there any lessons that we can be learned from this data? How can we pull this and translate this into potential different policy, different ways of staffing, trying to address what we're seeing here with the data. I'm wondering if even anecdotally you have any guesses why Tuesdays and Wednesdays for the higher uses of force.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hallerburton, of course, I would prefer to give a really substantive analysis to make any, definitive claims. One of my instincts is that domestic violence calls do have a higher rate of force. And I wonder if perhaps we're seeing some of that come through on those weekday nights. Again, just anecdotal, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think that'll be where it'll be really interesting for us in the community if we are able to start to pull or understand a little bit more of what may be the causes, and then also how might we react to those causes as well. So again, thank you for getting this information out here. There's a lot of it, and people I think can really spend a lot of time, playing around and trying to get a different look of how things are going on in the city. So thank you,
Madam Mayor. Yeah, Lexi, thank you so much. This is a wealth of information that you've gathered, put together, and been able to put on a website for not just transparency, but also to look at any connections as well. It's a lot of information, and I really appreciate the different ways it's laid out and how people can dig into that information too. It's great. One item I'm wondering if we could take a look at, or if you considered, is looking at the when we're talking about who are our Boise police officers, and see about maybe adding in years they've been on the force or years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been something that's been looked at?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, we have looked into that. That is an HR data set that is a little more complicated for lateral hires. We do have better information for someone who started with the Boise Police Department and has stayed their whole career. But when hires come over as laterals from different departments, we don't have good data there. So it is kind of difficult when a larger percentage of your force may have that data missing to do a proper analysis. But that is something we're potentially looking into when we move to the new Axon system, if that HR data can be collected in a different way.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just say in closing, I so appreciate the progress that you've made. This is really interesting. I mean, we had a meeting where we were able to look over this, and then I really appreciate that some of the council members have played with the data already. I see this as very responsive to what we have wanted to see and our desire to be able to transparently with the public provide information like this. So real time, or not real time, but somebody can actually get on and just look themselves at a year in review. I know a ton of work went into it, and it's really incredible what you've been able to build in response to the requests that we've provided with you. So thank you.
Madam Mayor, thank you all for your comments and attention. And I would be happy to pass things back to Director McKay to continue the presentation.
Madam Mayor and council members, one additional comment on the data. I am really excited because Lexi has built us a foundation, right? So this just got finished and posted as of yesterday, and all of your questions are exactly what we want. Now that we have a foundation and we have some tools, what would you like us to look at? And we will, of course, continue to look and think and work with BPD on what kind of questions we can ask and answer. So this is a really great starting point for OPA. Even though I'm 2 years in, feels like another good starting point. So let's get going on the rest of it then, and turning to contacts. You can see that OPA has had 90 contacts as of the end of September this year. 46 of those contacts met the definition of a complaint, which is an allegation that meets jurisdictional requirements and, if proven true, would violate BPD policy or law. These are the allegations that are formally sent over to Office of Internal Affairs, and the results are reviewed by us, and those are investigated by sometimes both offices. But always by OIA and reviewed by us. 42 of those were classified as informational only, and we classify a contact as informational when the request only necessitates some information on BPD policy or does not meet the jurisdictional requirements. In those instances, most often they are in the wrong place or they need help finding another city's Office of Police Accountability, and they're a little bit disappointed to know that no, they don't have one, and number two, no, we can't help them. So we do try and give them as much information as possible, not always what they were expecting. You can see that we also received 2 accommodations for officers in this period. The first recognized Officer Marshall for his professionalism and skillful de-escalation during an incident with a juvenile. And the second commended Officer Vaughn for his professionalism and strong performance of duty during a traffic incident. We're always happy to see when people in our community reach out to say thank you. When we compare this period to the same time period in 2024, the overall number of contacts are similar. However, a higher percentage of those contacts this year meet the criteria to be classified as complaints. We asked ourselves why. One possible explanation just could be continued exposure to who our office is and what our role is, but of course we can't say with any kind of certainty. Moving to the determinations of those complaints, you can see that complaints related to duty performance were the most common, with 22 complaints, followed by complaints alleging a constitutional rights violation with 5. And in most complaints, the officer was exonerated. A determination of exonerated means that the alleged act did occur, but that it was justified, lawful, and/or proper. There were 3 sustained complaints so far this year. 2 of those were for failure to timely activate on-body video, and the third was for a failure to timely follow up on potential additional evidence. We did have 4 complaints that fell outside of OPA's 90-day time limit, but as a note, we are available to waive that time limit if we find extenuating circumstances exist. We have spent a considerable amount of time this year investigating the critical incidents from last year. As you can see, there were 6 use of deadly force incidents in 2024. 4 of those investigations have been completed by OPA, and 3 of those 4 have been released and posted on our website. One report, the one titled Wilski, is the incident that happened at St. Al's Hospital. That report is being held pending criminal proceedings for 2 suspects in 2 counties up north. The remaining 2 incidents are not yet ready for OPA review, but they are close to completion, and we anticipate both of those reports being released by OPA by the end of November. One significant note here is that there have been no use of deadly force incidents to date in 2025. Given that there were 6 use of deadly force incidents in each of the preceding 2 years, we've asked the obvious, why? What has changed? And while we cannot say, of course, with any certainty why, you'll hear more about our insights about BPD's training, equipment use, and practices that may provide some insight. Before I dive into those practices, I think recognition is warranted for the city's continued investment in and BPD's commitment to advanced training, technology, and equipment. With the addition of new software such as Peregrine, the integration of high-performance drones, and expanded use of less lethal tools, and all the accompanying training, we're seeing a positive impact on officers' ability to quickly gather relevant data and information on the involved individual, employ lower levels of force, and improve tactical decision-making. While certainly any of these aspects of policing alone none of these aspects of policing alone can be responsible for the decreased use of deadly force combined, they most certainly increase the likelihood of safely resolving an incident. And as Chief Dennison regularly reminds me, the involved individual controls their own decision-making on whether to cooperate and peacefully resolve a situation or conduct themselves in a manner that requires the use of deadly force. All that to say that I think the why is, we can say, likely a combination of strong training, officer skills, and certainly some luck. I would also like to recognize BPD's leadership for continuing invitation for OPA to observe their classroom and scenario-based trainings. We are also meeting with specialized teams and personnel. Their ongoing commitment to transparency and accountability make OPA's work not only more robust, but allows us to truly capture an accurate picture of policing in Boise. Through these exercises, our team has gained valuable insight into not only the how BPD does business, but why in their operations. These trainings are run by highly experienced and skilled instructors, and they are robust, complex, and effective. If you've not had the chance to go out and observe some of these live scenario trainings, I really encourage you to do so. Additionally, OPA is now included in BPD's promotional process. This is a new process, and it's really, really exciting. This allows OPA to meet one-on-one with newly promoted sergeants, lieutenants, and captains to discuss our process, our priorities, our focus, and communication process. We are in the midst of establishing highly effective and productive foundations for collaboration. And finally, on this side, the recommendations. And as you know, through OPA's review of use of force, contacts, policies, and use of deadly force incidents, OPA identifies opportunities and makes recommendations. This year, our recommendations focused on, number 1, reviewing and enhancing mutual aid and canine policies. Mutual aid is when another agency requests help from BPD. And through a few of our incidents that we have reviewed, we have made some recommendations on policies and standards when BPD officers are responding. We fully support a review of the canine policy by an outside expert. Clarifying supervisory expectations in both officer case reviews and high-risk incidents. What we see is that sergeants hold a tremendous amount of influence over their patrol teams. And when you have a highly effective sergeant reviewing the daily incidents, and when we review everything from use of force to any kind of incident, and we make recommendations back to things that we think that individual officer would benefit from, maybe some training, coaching, mentoring, those kind of things, recommendations we make go back to the sergeants, and those sergeants employ those. So we are seeing a really robust process kicking off now in that regard. We are also recommending reinforcing and training effective communication. If I could say nothing else over and over and over, it would be effective communication. Think back to that presentation maybe a year ago where we talked about stop the shouting, and it really dials into what is effective communication and how does it differ from giving commands. They are two separate things and they both have an appropriate role, but I really am trying to continue to emphasize when appropriate that good, solid, effective communication is going to be just as an effective tool as some of our less lethal tools. So we're continuing to hit that as well. Also really emphasizing tactical slowing, de-escalation practices, all of those to improve overall response effectiveness. Happy to see that BPD trainers are taking what recommendations we make in our formal reports that get posted. They take those recommendations and they are immediately incorporated into their block training. So the responsiveness by BPD is really encouraging and appreciated. Okay, a highlight for our team is always our collaborations and trainings this year, each year. In the past 6 months, we have focused more time on training in addition to our professional and community engagements. I've listed some of the highlights of our engagements here, and I'll just briefly hit on 3 of them. We had a unique and rewarding experience when we met with a delegation of prosecutors from Poland, and that was through the Global Ties Idaho, which this is a short-term professional and cultural exchange program that's organized through a private nonprofit partner of the U.S. Department of State's International Leadership Program. We were fortunate to be one of 6 local entities chosen for the exchange here in Boise, and we had a robust and enlightening discussion about police oversight in each of our cities. And we were even able to present our PowerPoint in Polish thanks to our interpretive services here at the city. And just a side note, policing terms differ, right? And so we have our terminology and they have our terminology, and we had a few terms that they just did not understand and they didn't translate perhaps quite right. And so we would be going through and explaining things and we would just start to hear this giggle all the way around the room because one of our terms is soft, empty hand. And what that means is you guiding somebody or perhaps pushing them. And they thought that was hilarious. So we did really have a lot of levity in our meeting too. When we met with this delegation and they were delightful. You can see our picture here. That was after our meeting. Okay, the second one I want to highlight was a meeting that we had with the leaders of the city of Aurora, Colorado, who are seeking insight as they are setting up their own Office of Police accountability. We talked about organizational structure, authority, duties, processes, as well as the challenges of oversight. And we also talked a lot about how we are doing things here, what authority we have, what access we have, and then how are things conducted nationally and what are those challenges. Of course, it changes dramatically from city to city, but it was a really good exercise for us to self-examine what we're doing and why we're doing it that way and think outside the box. And then also for them to learn about what kind of data should they be, what kind of authority should they get with their data and how to establish a relationship with the police department and those kinds of things. So it was really interesting. And I honestly think we came away from it learning just as much as they did. The third highlight I'd like to share is a recent demonstration that we attended at one of BPD's training facilities. They provided us a really impressive demonstration on the use of firearms, less lethal tools, and explosives for breaching. We were especially struck by the level of expertise and professionalism by their instructors and specialty team members throughout the event. I think we all agree it was maybe our best field trip to date. And then a final note as a thank you to all of you for your support for our team to attend the NACOL conference this fall down in San Francisco. That's the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. That is a mouthful. It was really interesting how they really hit the use of AI in law enforcement investigations and oversight, and then the advanced use of drones in law enforcement. So it was kind of good to see a preview how some of these bigger cities are conducting their law enforcement investigations and conducting their oversight. So good to start those conversations there. And finally, we just want to go through 3 of our priorities and goals for the coming year. In line with the city's value that there is nothing we can do better, we are looking at the timeframes for the release of our critical incident reports. It varies widely from months to a year and sometimes over a year, and I think we can do better. There are many steps involved in this process from the time the incident occurred to the time we post the report and BPD posts the video in the Critical Incident Task Force report. Some of those steps are within BPD or OPA's control, and some of them are not. So for those that we can control, we are going to collaborate and establish a clear process and timeline for each of these steps to ensure that these are released as soon as possible, while still ensuring the integrity of the investigation. Our second goal is related to data. With our new data capabilities, Lexi will be looking to provide objective context for BPD's use of force data by benchmarking against a nationwide peer group of statistically similar cities. This analysis will offer a clearer picture about how Boise aligns with peer agencies and help identify areas of strength and opportunities for continued improvement. Our last goal is related to BPD's behavioral health teams, their work. With the staffing of BPD's 3rd behavioral health team, which I'll remind you is a behavioral health specialist and a sworn officer, with that 3rd team and coverage during the swing shift, which we've not had previously, we will look to quantify the impact of these teams by analyzing their calls for service, proactive work in the community, and the effect on outcomes. This analysis will help quantify the value and effectiveness of this important partnership model. And with that, we conclude our prepared presentation and are happy to stand for questions. And I have to say, I appreciate your support on the rat abatement because I'm a little bit nervous to go home and look at my barbecue now.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, Nicole, be careful.
No, I'm a little nervous about it.
Thank you for the presentation. A couple of things. First of all, I am really pleased to hear about the behavioral health portion of your work. That's something that Councilmember Halliburton and I had asked. We take a look at I think it was 2 budget cycles ago. I know it's something that we really value as a council, and we certainly get a lot of studies across our desk that talk about how that can help in our community. So I'm very anxious to see how it works here in Boise. And then second of all, will you go to the slide that you had that went over the number of complaints? Okay, yeah. Okay, so one more.
Oops, so this is Madam Mayor and Councilmember Willits. This is the complaint determinations, and this is the contacts, which is some are complaints, some are inquiries.
I think the complaint determination.
Okay.
I wanted to ensure my understanding on this. So of all of the ones that we got, only 3 were ones that were sustained. In other words, they needed an investigation.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Willits, please let me clarify that. No, all complaints are investigated. If it's classified as an inquiry, that means it didn't meet jurisdictional requirements or didn't need anything other than some information. So those don't get formally investigated. Those are handled just in office and we get them on the right path. But every complaint, which meets jurisdictional requirements and if proven true, violates a policy or law, those all get investigated.
Thank you so much for level setting that language. That's a really important piece. So using that 3% were sustained. In other words, the investigation yielded that the police officer involved did not follow police procedure. Is that the end on this? Like 3% of about the 90 complaints?
So Madam Mayor and Councilmember Willits, that is 3 actual incidents, not a percentage.
Okay.
So out of the total, what did I say?
90?
42? Whatever that adds up to. I think it was 42.
Okay.
46. 46 of the contacts met jurisdictional requirements and were classified as complaints. 3 of those were sustained. 2 were body failure to timely activate on body video, and 1 was an evidence issue.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
First, I just want to commend your team, all of you, our BPD leadership and the rank and file for engaging in the trust building and the training I think that it takes to address some of these issues. You know, while 6-0 is, I think, something that we should always celebrate, maybe there's a little bit of luck involved, but I really do believe that a lot of it has to do with training and a willingness to adjust behaviors. And I think that sometimes we don't know what kind of training needs to take place unless we have somebody who is evaluating those things on multiple different perspectives. And so I think that the 2 perspectives, both internally and also through OPA, has been tremendously valuable in bringing some of those numbers down. And I don't want to like discount chance and luck, but I do think there is a difference. You know, we are seeing, I think, a lot of progress, and I think a lot of it has to do with that. And I would include the technology, the less than lethal technology as well. And I'm excited to see all those things. I'm also excited to see the looking into those behavioral health response teams. That has been a huge priority for council, I think, ever since I've been on here, and trying to better understand their effectiveness and the investment that we're making in those areas and how that may be driving down different incidents of force, or also the communication that you were talking about and the importance of having better communication that they may have through that additional specialty. I am curious, as far as the dashboard goes, if that presentation has been made or will be made to BPD. Just because that might be information that they may want to know as well. I think a lot of people want to figure out how they can be more effective at what they're doing and understanding data. And so I don't know if there's any additional training or awareness or presentations that may be given to BPD as well to make sure that they know exactly what you're presenting to us.
Madam Mayor and Council Member Halliburton, thank you for those comments. Twofold. First comment is I couldn't agree with you more on the training. Of course, I don't know what the training was like, you know, further back than 2 years, but I can tell you the training from the time I started to now, we have seen a dramatic enhancement in that live scenario training. And the expertise of these trainers is, I can't emphasize enough how impressive that is. I think it is working and I think it's effective. So really, really excited about that. And again, so appreciative of BPD saying, yeah, come on over. Sure. Whichever one they send us the full schedule and we pick and choose which ones we go to. So really impressive cooperation there. Number 2, yes, we did go and preview the data dashboards with BPD leadership, and they were really positive about, number 1, the access to it, and number 2, the fact that Lexi was able to put all these different data sources together, build the platforms, and get it out there. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were some requests from BPD on, you know, hey, can you take a look at this? And yeah, we're excited about that.
Yeah, wonderful. And maybe just one quick finer point that I would say, I think that there's always been really good training going on. I think that maybe one of the large differences that we're seeing now is a very data-informed training that your office is able to provide some additional insight to. And so I think everyone's always trying to figure out how they can do their jobs better. But if we've got some specific data and some trends that we can see and different ways of examining things, I think that that is making the difference. And I would give your team, you know, a very large amount of credit for that, as well as the police department for being accepting to that feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So
City
very much.
Council. Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you. All right. As far as I understand it, we don't have an exec. So we will break. We'll be back here at 6. Thanks, everybody.